relates the creation of the universe. God said, "Let there be light," and there was a big bang, and there was light. This conjures up images of stars, galaxies, deep space, little men. So it's a good opportunity to ask the question, as Jews go into space, how do they practice Judaism there?
Tonight, a Bay Area tech startup is giving people an out-of-this-world opportunity by building the first luxury hotel in space.
That's right, Julia. It's still somewhat hard to comprehend. An actual hotel in space could be the destination for your next vacation, but this is not just about choosing space over Hawaii for a few days. There's a much bigger mission in the works.
Can get people out there experiencing it, seeing how exciting it is, and getting a taste for it, then what we can do is set the stage for long-term orbit organization.
While it may be cool to float around in zero-gravity luxury space hotels and soak in 16 sunrises a day, this is far from being just a concept.
Giving a land Aziz Ashana I giving a land Aziz Afana Dat zu weinen es vergnügen wo das Herz kannst du kriegen Amma Leigala Appahastramala Akkaharnatsala Unaglaze la Söken mit seiner Ei alles Rumänisch ein. Ist der rumänische Wein? Das ist nicht rumänisch Wein. Das ist die Champagnerwein. Oh, ist das die expensive kind? Hey, digga, digga, dum, digga, digga, dum. Hey, digga, digga, dum, digga, digga, dum. Hey, digga, digga, dum, digga, digga, dum. Hey, digga, digga, dum. Is that Mogen David Wein? That is Mogen David Wein. If that's Mogen David Wein, that is nicht die expensive kind.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. And thank you very much to Fully Automated Luxury Kosher Space Kibbutz for the musical stylings as we waited together. I'm so excited to see everyone's faces. It's so lovely. But yeah, I guess we're going to begin. My name's Sonia. I'm a member of the Loud Jew Collective, LJC for short. I want to begin by acknowledging that we are hosting this Zoom from stolen lands. I am zooming in from the land of the Bunun people of the Kulin Nation. Please feel free to put in the chat whose lands you are zooming in from tonight. I would like to acknowledge that sovereignty over these lands has never been ceded, and I would like to pay my respects to Kulin elders past and present, and to First Peoples who are joining us tonight. Welcome to our launch. Tonight we'll be hearing from some incredible individuals, activists, thinkers, feelers, artists about their visions for the future. We are sad that Eugenia Flynn couldn't join us, but we are so grateful that Crystal McKinnon and Timmah Ball could join us at the very last minute. Thank you so much. It is almost an impossible task that we are asking our speakers and each other at this time to think about expansive and transformed possibilities. This event is ushering in the Jewish high holidays, which in turn marks the beginning of the Shemitah year. Shemitah is a biblical imperative to let the fields lie fallow for 1 year in a 7-year cycle. It is a time for rest, regrouping and regeneration. It is the land's Shabbat, an armistice, as Abraham Joshua Heschel said. I think the idea of Shemitah and armistice is an important one for Jewish settlers in so-called Australia. Jewish dreams from this place have been complicit and effective agents of wars waged here in Israel-Palestine and transnationally. Any radical or transformed thinking needs to be rooted in stepping back, laying down arms, and learning new tools and modes and methods for future making. This is what the Loud Jew Collective is about. So tonight, each speaker will be talking on the topic, what is the future you dream of? And will be introduced by a different member of LJC. We also want to hear your dreamings, imaginings, thoughts, and feelings. So please feel free to use the chat. Productive and respectful atmosphere tonight. We also have set up a whiteboard that Lily has posted on the chat. I think, Lily, if you could post it in now, this is a space for you to share more of your thoughts and dreams with us. It's so lovely to see everyone's faces. Hello. And please leave your cameras on. Okay, so we are going to begin. And speakers, before you start talking, please unmute yourself. Oh, and a last thing. Happy birthday to Elsa, one of our speakers, and 2 of our Loud Jew members, Max and Babs, and to anyone else's whose birthday might be in the past few days or in the future few days. Celebrations all around. So I'm going to begin by introducing my friend and colleague, Jordy Silverstein. Dr. Jordy is a historian and writer based in Naam. She's a member of the Loud Jew Collective.
Thanks, Sonia. Thanks so much, everyone. I want to start by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and to pay my respects to elders past and present. So this always was and always will be Aboriginal land, and sovereignty has never been ceded, and that this is something that we can and must think about in our everyday lives as we walk on this Aboriginal land, for those of us who are not Indigenous. Yeah, this was a hard one to write, but let's see how we go. Let's see. Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot about slowness and gentleness. about trying to be calm, not constantly trying to anticipate and wonder what will come next. I think a lot about ambivalence and about being comfortable with ambivalence. How does that orientation to the world and to each other change if we're comfortable with uncertainty, with not knowing and not rushing to know? What can our relationships look like if we don't rush to anticipate and to produce something, but instead settle into the not knowing, take time to breathe and learn, orient ourselves towards seeing rather than producing? What if we're not in a rush to develop to the end point, to see how it turns out, but instead we take time in the liminality of the unknown? It's a challenge though, right? We want to know that it's going to turn out okay, particularly at the moment. I find myself constantly anticipating the worst, playing over in my head scenarios of what deaths of my loved ones would look like, how we'd manage with funerals during lockdown, which 10 people I would want to be there. God forbid, poi poi. I find myself rushing to it. Let's get it out of the way, get it sorted, get it dealt with, make it understood. But what is the future I dream of? It's one that's still, calm and generous, one which thrives in ambivalence and uncertainty. And I'm thinking also here of humility, of the openness created by saying we don't know. I want to argue for a future built around these values, which I see as sitting alongside communities acting for justice and in solidarity, and against the forms of knowledge and production that the nation state, patriarchy, capitalism, colonialism, heteronormativity try to instill. There's a different set of questions that are opened up about how we can be in the world if we prioritise not knowing and the humility of always learning. In these isolated times, and I live by myself and part of my family is across town and other parts in Sydney, so I see them all only mediated by the screen. In these times, I've been thinking a lot about how we can be in community through not knowing together, through endless conversation. I love conversation. I love interacting with other people. I love hearing ideas and critiques, those kinds of world-shattering new insights that take your breath away and make you see the world anew. I love new ways of telling stories and describing what we're seeing. But I also want space for grumpiness, irritability, and discontent. No more toxic positivity. I want more space for bad and hard feelings, for the painful and the sad, for people bumping up against each other and for learning through the difficulty of interrelationships. True intimacy is hard. I love the idea of a future where everyone is committed to the project of constant learning and constant conversation. I dream of a future where we're able to touch each other's lives in new ways. I dream of a future lived in the networks and the in-between, where we find community and build solidarity and we're accountable to each other, where we try to repair any harms we've done. As a non-Zionist Jew, I don't think Jews have a homeland. The Bund says that Jews are at home wherever we are, but what if we're at home in no place? What can it do to how we think about ourselves and our interactions with others if we truly encounter the fact that we all rely on generosity to make our lives in the world? So where some Jews, Zionists that is, see the solution to Jewish homelessness as being a Jewish nation state, I see the solution as no nation state, or the end of that form of organising the world. Our homes are potentially in the interstices, the liminalities, the in-between spaces, the margins and the networks. It's in living with others, not trying to control them. It's in deeply respecting the Aboriginal lands and waters on which we gratefully live. Rich, enduring and complex connection with others is our home. Our past, our history, our collective future is our home. Within my Jewishness, I think about what it means to be alienated and outside. I dream of a future where I don't have to explain Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to my boss. I dream of a future where everyone gets paid to take leave to celebrate all cultures' festivals. I dream of a future where everyone gets paid. I dream of a future where no one gets paid because money is no longer a core organising principle in our world. I dream of a future where we all have bigger imaginations. What could our society look like if we abandoned preconceptions of what a response looked like, or of what limitations there are and what we can create? Let's escape the boring responses, the same mundanity that characterises so much of life. I want strong forms of resistance and fight, no exploitation, and a continually held memory that what I desire is always contingent, is ever changing, and will not be what others want or imagine. I imagine a future where we're not engaging with each other to extract from each other, but rather we engage to be in community and in relationships of solidarity. Colonial forms of extraction, of ownership, of plunder, of domination shape so much of our lives now. Let's imagine different forms of relating to each other. What horizons of possibility could we create then? What can we create if we dwell in potentiality? Thanks.
Thanks, Jordy. That was great. So our next speaker is Timmah Ball. Timmah is a non-fiction writer of Baladong Noongar heritage, whose writing is influenced by studying and working in the field of urban planning. In 2016, she won Westerly Magazine's Patricia Hackett Prize, and her writing has appeared in a range of publications, including Art Guide Australia, the Griffith Review, Mianjin, and Magazine. So over to you, Timmah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just want to say thank you specifically to Jordy. That was like so moving. I think I've been feeling like pretty numb and weird recently, particularly today. So I really, really needed to hear that. So thank you so much. I want to acknowledge that I'm zooming in from Bunurong country. And acknowledge elders past, present and future and other Aboriginal people joining us this evening. I'm going to read a poem about a future that I think a lot of us want, but is really hard to imagine. It's by a writer called Jackie Wang, who's an Asian American writer. She's a prison abolitionist and wrote an amazing book called Carceral Capitalism, which also hopes for an anti-capitalist future. I think obviously what she's writing has really powerful and immediate impacts to what's going on in so-called Australia, which is why I wanted to read it. I guess to give her some background, her brother at the age of, I think, 15 or 16, was accused of a crime he didn't commit, but was sentenced to life imprisonment, a sentence in which he continues to serve at the moment. And yeah, obviously has lost his life in so many respects. Yeah, in her book, Carceral Capitalism, she really details the horrendous impact on the industrial prison complex. And I wanted to read one of her poems because I think she writes so beautifully and powerfully about why we need to end prisons and end capitalism, hopefully in the future. And the poem is called "The Sewer Rat Counter-Haunts the Prison by Nestling in Society's Collapsing Aorta. I sneak into my brother R's prison and sleep, curled up beneath the concrete between walls in the air vents. I'm posted up in the duct. There is always the danger of being caught by a guard. The social structure is inside out, that the prison is wearing its entrails. Even as a shadow dweller, I am at risk of being made into a ligament of the system. So I come with bolt cutters. In case. Our mother refuses to believe she has lost another child to society's dark matter, the prison. She tells herself R is younger than what he is, so she can think he has been locked up for fewer years. R calls our mother to say he will not be able to file an appeal for contact visits. Though nobody sees me from my hiding place, I think. This is how they unravel families. Outside the prison, it is always raining. As though the weather too were in the conspiracy to demoralize every prisoner upon their release. Everyone who passes through the prison must also pass through the rain of shame. But even this humiliating rite of passage does not guarantee release, and there is perfect symmetry between the interior and exterior of the prison. The city becomes another disc in the spine of a generalized carceral logic. Why does the world suddenly look like a set of Blade Runner? but more ominous. Giant multi-story metallic blue Google buses hog the roads. Though it is always raining on the destroyed city, the men of technoscience remain safe and unperturbed in their mobile metallic citadels. Did the Google men make it in rain on all the plebs? Did they finally figure out how to control the weather? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Timmah.
No,
My name is Ready. My name is Babs, and I'm on the LJC organizing team as well. And it's also my birthday, and I'm speaking from unceded Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung country as well. Bring you Jeanine, a Palestinian activist, organizer, and storyteller based in Nam. She is the director of Road to Refuge, an organization that aims to change the narrative on refugees and people seeking asylum by amplifying the voices and perspectives of those with lived experience. Thank you so much for joining us, Jeanine.
Thanks for having me. I have to admit, I'm a bit nervous following those two, but here it goes. So I'm dialing in from Larakia country, and I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land I'm dialing in from and extend this acknowledgement to First Nations people across the continent. I also think it's important as we speak about what future we dream of to acknowledge and remind each other the importance of following the lead of First Nations people in our pursuit of a fair, just and free future. So I actually found this prompt, what future do you dream of, really difficult to answer. And that kind of got me thinking about why I found the question so difficult to answer. And so I'm going to do a bit of a cop-out to begin with and actually start by unpacking why I found the question really difficult to answer and why I found it so difficult to respond to. We spend so much time thinking about what we don't want. Abolish capitalism, abolish white supremacy, abolish the patriarchy, abolish settler colonialism, abolish Zionism. We know so well what we don't want, but do we actually know what we want? We spend so much time, understandably, thinking about the injustices of the past and the ongoing nature of them. The Balfour Declaration, the Nakba, the Oslo Accords, the First Intifada, the Naksa, the Second Intifada, the Unity Intifada, Sheikh Jarrah, Silwan, Lifta, Gaza. The Frontier Wars, the Stolen Generations, Aboriginal deaths in custody, Black Lives Matter, justice for Auntie Tanya Day, justice for Wayne Fella. We spend so much time reacting and resisting to the injustices faced in the here and the now. And this leaves little, if any, time to dream about the future, to dream about the after. What happens after abolition? What happens after settler colonialism? What happens after Australia? What happens after Israel? Mahmoud Darwish said the metaphor of Palestine is stronger than the reality. Anytime we as Palestinians do dream about a future Palestine, we ironically dream of the Palestine of the past, the metaphor, the nostalgia of Palestine, the Palestine our grandparents told us stories of, a Palestine that, as hard as it is for us to come to terms with, no longer actually exists. We have conflated return to a land with a return to a time. So the future I dream of is a future where we actually can dream, without the limitations and constraints placed on us by the everyday injustices that are all-consuming and leave such little room to imagine and create alternate realities beyond the bounds of our struggle. With all that being said, I do think it's not just important but critical to think about our past when determining our own future. It's important that in determining our future, we don't reproduce injustices of the past. We preserve our rich culture and heritage, and we honour the legacy of our forefathers. What that means is that what I do know is that any future I dream of does not exist within the confines of man-made structures that have been created to exclude people, whether it's exclusion through language, through walls, or through borders, all tools used by colonial and imperialist forces to reinforce division and domination. And I know what I've just done is exactly what I said the problem is. I've just talked about what I don't want, exclusion. So to reframe what I just said, what I want is the time and space to be able to develop language and a narrative that focuses on freedom, justice, and inclusion, and create a future that is boundless, where I can enter Palestine without being interrogated, where I can drive from 48 Palestine to the West Bank without crossing a checkpoint, where I can drive from the Galilee to Beirut without crossing a border. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Sivan and I'm part of the, I'm a loud Jew and I'm part of the collective. And if I think about the future I dream of, it's belonging to this kind of space, which is a home from now and onwards. And it's really wonderful to be part of it. I'm going to be introducing Elsa Tuet-Rosenberg. Elsa is a queer, Jewish, and Chinese woman of colour and co-founder of anti-racism and social justice organisation HUE. She is an educator, performer and facilitator, passionate about mutual aid and creating accessible and brave spaces for transformative conversations to work through collective liberation. Elsa will be speaking about her relationship with idealism and marginalised identities when working towards the futures we deserve. I give you Elsa.
Thanks so much, Sivan. And I want to start as well by acknowledging that I am joining tonight from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Eastern Kulin Nation and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all First Peoples who are joining us at this event this evening. So a couple of months ago, I visited my Buba in aged care to chat to her about a story I was writing to perform at the since cancelled Festival of Jewish Arts and Music about anti-Zionism in the Jewish community. We spoke at length about our family's history with anti-Zionism and left-wing Jewry in general. And during the conversation, as we were talking about the logistics of justice for the future, my Buba shook her head and smiled at me and said warmly, "You really are an idealist, aren't you?" Now, as a person with a mixed bag of marginalizations, I reckon I've been called a buzzkill far more often than I have been called an idealist. Whether it's being an angry woman of color or a man-hating feminist or just a Jew that complains about everything. I've often been branded as hypercritical or pessimistic or seeing the worst in everything. I've often been told that the issues I see in the world are reflective of my own bad attitude, that I'm jaded, and that maybe if I changed my outlook and manifested a little, things wouldn't be so bad. So being called an idealist is a bit of a change of pace. But my Buba is right. I am an idealist. So often people see the ways I critique society as inherently negative, but for me, the ways I view the world come from a profound place of optimism. I believe that there is something better for all of us, something that is possible and worth working towards. And for those of us with marginalized identities, we know that we deserve so much more than what we're being given. Sometimes I feel like marginalization gives me the gift of dissatisfaction. While the most privileged accumulate power, wealth, land, and resources in a bid to fill the void that can only really be filled with a return to ourselves, to our morality, to culture, to community, and to justice. But Idealism is tricky because for some of us, our pasts don't even provide us with the blueprints for our possible future. While some cultures have rich and enduring histories of beauty and dreaming and connection and community, in the Jewish community, I feel like the histories we reflect on make it hard for us to envision an idealistic future. When every holiday and event revolves around our long history of suffering, it makes sense that we would lose our sense of optimism. What does it mean to dream of justice if you've never seen it? I understand why so many Jewish people choose to assimilate into whiteness and colonialism, assimilation into a system that doesn't really serve us and continues to oppress others. There is an overwhelming pessimism among us that tells us that this is all we deserve, that this level of safety or comfort or security is enough, even if it's at the expense of someone else. But for the idealists among us, and I think that there are many of us joining tonight, we know that there is more and that it's worth doing everything to get there. I want to see a future that I have no practical experience in. I want to work towards shared futures of collective liberation, where our communities prioritize well-being, care, love, and connection with people, with country, and with ourselves. Where justice is exercised outside a system of policing, punishment, law, and order, and where conflict and discomfort are opportunities for growth and healing and repair. I want to see a future where we are free to explore and nourish all parts of ourselves, and where they are all held, celebrated, and valued, and where we are all given the conditions and resources to grow and thrive. I want a future that truly serves all of us, rather than a select few. So I want to thank my Bubba for the beautiful compliment. I will wear the label of idealist with pride, and it will motivate me to keep going. I'm happy to be an idealist when others have lost hope, when others are tired and exhausted and burnt out. I know I am an idealist at heart, even on my darkest days of dread and despair. And I feel grateful that when I don't have the energy, that the other beautiful idealists around me will continue fighting while I rest. Thank you to all the idealists here tonight. I can't wait to keep working towards the futures we dream of together, and even the ones we can't imagine yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsa. That was wonderful. I'm Philly. I am coming at you from my bedroom on Wurundjeri country. I also want to join in paying my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to extend that to all First Nations people here today. I'm a proud Jewish woman from New Zealand. I'm also Whakapapa Māori. I'm from Ngāti Porou and Kaitahu tribes, spanning actually the east coast of the North Island and the east coast of the South Island of so-called New Zealand. And I would like to introduce to you tonight the wonderful Sanmati Verma. Samati is a migration lawyer, organizer and writer from Punjab, now living on unceded Burong country. She's a member of Cross-Border Operational Matters, a collective dedicated to resourcing boycott and divestment campaigns against mandatory immigration detention. Samati currently works with the United Workers Union. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for inviting me here tonight. I'm speaking from unceded land of the Bunurong people, and I pay my respect to their elders, past, present and to come, and pay my deference to their struggle for sovereignty and self-determination. I'm extremely humbled to be asked to speak tonight, particularly amongst people whose work and thought and contribution to our struggles I so admire. I'm not entirely convinced that my thoughts add anything to what's already been said, but I offer them with the greatest humility. And Anyway, you'll see that before I get to the point, there's a lot of dwelling on the world I think none of us really dreamed of, but the world we find ourselves in. So I suppose I had to start addressing the proposition that we were given by reflecting on what I see now, the world that I see now. I'm an uninvited settler on this land. As I said, I live on unceded Bunurong country. On my way to work, I drive past a hotel in which 44 people are detained against their will. That's called an alternative place of detention, and that's precisely what it is. It's an experiment in the form and composition that detention can take up. People are held in their rooms and not permitted outdoors even briefly. They're concealed from the public by tinted windows and random periodic disruption of their communication. Nobody's told how long they're going to be detained, but they're told in definite terms that they could bring an end to that detention by volunteering to return to their so-called home country. Everyone who was detained is in critical need of medical care because the injuries and conditions that they sustained while they were detained on one of Australia's bigger mass immigration detention facilities managed on Nauru or Manus Island. Cleaning services in that hotel are provided by a company that is well known for its engagement of a vast network of contractors and subcontractors so that it can stand at an arm's length from the conditions of people who actually do the work. Many of the workers there are international students from the floodplains of Punjab, the Doaba, where I was born as well. They carefully swap ABNs with each other and friends who have work rights. They don't breach their visa conditions. They work 15-hour shifts as many days as their bodies will permit. They are working primarily to pay their contractors or else their landlord or their college to daily renew their license to remain in the country. There are only rare and glancing interactions with the people being detained in the hotel that they clean. Punjab, where I was born, where these folks are from, was immiserated by the colonial land management policies instituted by the British. The colonists imposed cash crops, wheat, maize, sugarcane and cotton, forcing small landholders to compete on an open market, driving them into debilitating debt. The colonial authorities invested nothing in industry, forcing people to eke out what existence they could from the land. Struggling landholders were lured into the army and became famously, as everyone knows, cannon fodder for the British. The post-colonial state entrenched these inequalities, persisting with staple crops as they degraded the land, meaning it yielded less and less. These processes created a surplus population stricken from their lands and livelihoods with no means to survive but to migrate, sometimes on student visas, sometimes on container ships headed for Europe. Nauru, where many of the detained refugees were previously held, is an object lesson in histories of colonialism leading to a future of racialized management and exploitation. After World War I, the island was placed under the joint administration of Australia, New Zealand and Britain. The local population was displaced as the country was strip mined for phosphate, leaving parts of it totally uninhabitable like a moonscape. Once the deposits were depleted, the country fell into a deep crisis. And in 2001, Nauru was forced to accept a deal with Australia, which rendered part of the country into an open-air prison for refugees and enlisted part of the population in the management of those racialized bodies. So, to answer the proposition, I dream of a world in which the struggles against the type of despair and dispossession I have described are seen as one struggle. In other words, I dream of a world overrun, in which the sheer force and ingenuity of human movement exceeds techniques of criminalisation, racialisation and bordering deployed by the state and capital to contain it, in which lives and livelihoods are placed directly back into people's sovereign hands, in which people no longer stand as supplicants in orderly lines, writing their papers, staking their claims before impervious colonising forces who are rapidly retreating after waging 20 years of war. The future is, as Angela Metropolis, my friend and comrade, writes, neither hope nor despair, but experiment.
Hello everyone, my name's Yael. I'm also part of the Loud Jew Collective. I am going to be introducing Samah Sabawi. So Dr. Samah Sabawi is an author, playwright, commentator and poet who wages beautiful resistance through her art and work. A recipient of multiple awards both nationally and internationally. Sabawi's theatre credits include the critically acclaimed plays Tales of a City by the Sea and Them. Sabawi's doctoral thesis was on transgenerational trauma and the Palestinian-Australian identity.
Wow. Thank you for inviting me to be on this panel, and what amazing things I've heard so far. I just want to sit and absorb. What do I want to say? I want to start by saying that I'm coming at you today from the land of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong tribes of the Kulin Nations, and I would like to pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and to pledge that while I'm a guest on their land, that I will continue to listen to their voices, to learn their history, their struggles, and aspirations. Storytelling has been central to this part of, to this process for me, and this process of learning and decolonizing. Reading the works of writers like Anita Heiss, Tony Birch, Larissa Behrendt, and Tara June Winch has taken me places outside of this world that I was introduced to through years of colonized education. The power of the books and the power of the stories has been just magnificent. Storytelling preserves the past and it explains the present, and it allows us to imagine the future, and that's the business that I'm in. I am a writer originally from Gaza in Palestine, and like all Palestinian writers, I wage words in the battle against injustice. I write with the urgency of the oppressed to end the oppression. I write to say that I am here, we are here, we exist, and we want our full rights and nothing less. When Zionism began to grow as a political movement in the late 19th century, the representation of Palestine without its indigenous inhabitants was a trademark of the Zionist imagination. And by the early 1900s, the Zionist movement adopted the slogan, "A land without a people," for a people without a land. And this striking ability to see the land and not its people is not at all unfamiliar in the history of imperial wars and conquests. In fact, here in Australia, a similar phrase was used, Terra Nullius, meaning a land that belongs to no one, to justify the British invasion and dispossession of the indigenous Aboriginal population. Silencing our voices today is an extension of these policies of erasing our presence and denying the ongoing crimes against us. So how do we move past that? I believe that the answer lies in the persistent need to confront erasure with imagination, to confront it with presence of culture and memory. For Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people here, as well as for Palestinians in the homeland, it is impossible to imagine a future or moving forward without acknowledgement of the traumatic events of the past and without removals of the shackles of oppression from the present, in order for us to begin the journey of reconciliation in a just and a peaceful coexistence that's based on equality and equal opportunity. We are asked today to imagine the future of our dreams, and I have to tell you that while it's important to engage in this creative exercise, that I struggled a lot in preparing. Even as a storyteller, my creativity is hampered by the reality of the here and now, this overwhelming, dystopian, soul-crushing reality that is being Palestinian today. I believe that panels like these are important to combat this overwhelming feeling of helplessness and isolation. We come together to express solidarity with one another and to empower and inspire each other so we can together imagine a better tomorrow. But we know that our work is outside of this panel and our work is hard. So I want to say that I vow to never forget that we come from colonized land and that we live on colonized land, and that here and there our struggle is one, and that for me to find peace on this stretch of earth, I must open my heart to the truth of its history. This is the only way forward for Israelis too. They must also reckon with the atrocities of the past and the atrocities of the present, if we are to move together forward to a better future. My future dream is one where we can all live together in peace as equals, where we uphold one another's basic human dignity, and where we treat the earth that we share with respect and with tenderness. Nothing less is worth dreaming about. I want to end with a poem I wrote that is called The Liberation Anthem. This is my rendition of an anthem to be sung. That day, you and I will stand side by side, shoulder to shoulder, watching a new dawn wipe away decades of hate and savagery. The day that I rise from the ashes of your oppression, I promise you I will not rise alone. You too will rise with me. You will be liberated from tyranny, and my freedom will bring you salvation. This is my rendition of an anthem to be sung. I'll craft new words outside of this language that has suffocated me. Your words are like your walls. They encroach on my humanity. I am more than demography. I am neither your collaborator nor your enemy. I am not your moderate, not your terrorist, not your fundamentalist, Islamist, extremist, militant, radical. I am more than adjectives, letters, and syllables. I will construct my own language, and I will replace your words of power with the power of my words. This is my rendition of an anthem to be sung. I don't want to obliterate or humiliate you. I refuse to hate you. Don't care to demonize or proselytize or theorize your intentions. Every breath you draw reminds me you are human. The sound of your beating heart is rhythm familiar to my ears. You and I are no different. We are made of blood and tears. This is my rendition of an anthem to be sung. I will resist and soar above your matrix of control. And with the power of my will, your wall will fall. And the concrete that once segregated us, we can use it to rebuild homes. Your bulldozers and your tanks will dissolve into the earth. The sap will return to the olive trees. The gates will open wide for the refugees. We will be free. We will be free. And I will be your equal. And only then you will be mine, my other self, my fellow human being. Thanks.
Sorry, forgot to unmute. Hi everyone, I'm Esther, joining you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people. And I'm a member of the Loud Jew Collective, which won't surprise anyone who knows me. So it's my honor tonight to introduce our last speaker, Joan Nestle, who I think has been teaching me how to dream of some kind of queer future since I was a teenager at least, so it's a great honor. Joan is an 81-year-old Jewish queer femme, originally from the Bronx, New York, and now we're lucky enough to have her living here with us in Naarm, Melbourne. She's the writer and co-founder of the Lesbian History Archives, and she's excited to talk with comrades tonight who are loud about their future visions. Thank you, Joan.
My hand is shaking with the taking in of your words. And I thought it was because I was 81 and not feeling so great that I had difficulty connecting to what we were supposed to do. And then I realized it was the human thing. Everyone has had problems. And may I start? I have learned from you that I speak from the lands of the Wurundjeri people. Originally, back in where I walked the streets of America, it was the Lenape people, but I never knew then the history of saying sorry and publicly recognizing the exiles. I've learned so much from so many of you here. I pulled something together, and in a way, it echoes pieces. first I want to say, for me, my dream of the future is you. Every face I'm seeing. I could stop right there because you've made the future visible to me. What I wrote was, the future I dream of, co-ops, communes, collectives, collective action for equity, for planetary care, for recognition of historical displacement, returns, reparations, repair, redistributions, relinquishment. Public ownership of necessities provided as human rights and believed in for public good, food, water, shelter, clothing, electricity, healthcare, and education, never sold and never owned. The future I dream of is here, is you, all of you, is collective striving to end inequities, hegemonies crumpled, certainties questioned, vast possibilities of thinking unlocked from hegemonic anchors. I read the poets to learn their language of the future, to grasp their offered legacies of word and vision, of human stuff, of possibilities, that silences are never silent if brought into the light of our search for other ways of being. And then I read this fact. Nearly every atom in our bodies was forged in the nuclear heart of a sun. And in a sense, the future will be a place where we dance in vastness. I am formed by the mid-20th century. The future lies partly in the new concepts I learned to say: biosphere governance, planetary consciousness, modern monetary theory. They're new worlds. I hope for a world where we are not constantly struggling to survive or drowning in our guilt for surviving. Hope is a green earth where tender-bodied creatures, ourselves included, never appear in a gun sight. Tough and gentle and tender and fierce, all in the service of equity and recovered, respected histories, queer beyond words, the stuff of stars. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you to all of our speakers. I have, goosebumps and chills, and I was feeling so nervous before, and because I've been feeling so claustrophobic in lockdown and with the oppressive nature of nowness. And I think that this event and everything that all you speakers have shared with us has just given me the space to breathe a bit. And there was, really, I think so many threads between what all of you said. The threads being unchained, unbound, unbridled, free. It's, anyway, excellent. I'd like to just quickly introduce someone who's going to be joining us for a discussion with the speakers, Crystal McKinnon. Dr. Crystal McKinnon is an Amungu Yamaj academic, researcher, and community organizer. She's a historian and critical Indigenous studies scholar. And I would like her and all the other speakers, I guess I just invite you to comment on what each other have said and what thoughts this brings up for you.
I can start because everyone's words were so incredible, and whilst they had common threads are also really different, I was blown away, as I think everyone else was through listening. I'm just gonna turn up, but one of the things I was thinking of through listening to everyone's talks also was the Ruth Wilson Gilmore quote that talks about freedom as a place, and freedom is a place. And I was thinking about the space that the Loud Jew collective have created here, which, to me, when she talks about freedom as a place, I think this collective is creating those places of freedom, and it's through resistance and activism and relationship building, which centres Indigenous land and sovereignty through the activism and activism and resistance making. That's the way. Anyway, I was just thinking about those things. So I'd love to hear more people, what others in the audience, I guess, or however you guys are running it, think about the future as freedom and through solidarity building. And thanks.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I was just reflecting on something that you were just describing, Crystal, of I think the mechanisms of what we would like our future to look like feel more accessible than like actually painting a picture of what that future looks like. Like, I think that it's, I love, how we describe that we want it to be grounded in First Nations sovereignty and in solidarity and in community building. And I just noticed that, for many of us, I think describing this picture of this future feels really challenging, but something that might bridge that maybe for others of us too is that, reflecting on what we want, the mechanisms of how we want to get to that future, and that starts to build that future for us as well.
Mm.
I was thinking also about languages and what languages we speak in our dreamed futures. I guess language in terms of both, there was poetry tonight, and there was, I guess, prose, but there's Arabic and there's Aboriginal languages and English, and how do we articulate? The process of articulation is also a question of what words we can use and how those words understood by different people in different ways. And what does it do? And I guess I was thinking, as the music was playing at the start, some people who are familiar with the song Deloitte, let's say, knew that it was, it's a song that's fuck the police, and that this is, this great song that numerous people have used and reused and to tell different stories of abolition and police violence and police brutality. But if you don't know that song, you don't know the Yiddish, you wouldn't have heard that song in the same way. I don't know. I was just kind of.
I was really interested in something that Jeanine said about we're so busy knowing what we don't want that we don't have the time to think about what it is, what happens after the oppression ends. And I'm interested in that space between the ending of the oppression and the new beginning. And I think when I first saw the question, I just thought it's such a luxury to actually try to imagine when we're trying to stop imminent, ongoing violence, to try to imagine. And yes, it is important to imagine where we want to be. Should it take, it still seems like a luxury. It's the poem that I recited, for example, if I were to read it to a room full of Palestinians, they will just say, what world do you live in? Like, how can your mind stretch that far when we're dealing with daily atrocities? And so I'm just interested in how you would tie the two in. Yes, we have to have a dream and a vision. Martin Luther King, when he stopped when he gave the speech in front of millions of people that arguably changed the way people felt, their hearts and their minds. He said, I have a dream. He didn't say, I have a peace plan or a roadmap. He just said, I have a dream. So dreams are very powerful things. And I think tonight just reminded me of how powerful they can be. Are people talking and I can't hear them, or?
No, I think we're awkwardly waiting for somebody else to talk. The awkwardness of a group conversation on Zoom in front of 100 people.
Can I take the opportunity to ask a question of everyone? When you first saw the question, what was the first thought that came to your mind at a personal level of the things that you wanted to stop instantly? What is your most prioritized struggle at the moment? Is that a fair question to ask?
It's a great question. Sanmati, what's your answer?
Yes, because I'm the one awkwardly on mute. I don't know, Samah. I suppose that was what I was trying to long-windedly sort of get at, that, I tried to answer that. I was reading an interesting book on the weekend in order to prepare for this. And it's a book put together by folks called Out of the Woods Collective, and they're a group of environmentalists, I suppose. But the essays that I was reading were sort of about, they're written in an interesting way. They're authorless. They write as a collective, so there's a strange authorial voice in there because there's a bunch of them. And before all of their own essays, they have a bit in italics where they sort of apologize for how wrong the essay is, and they explain when it was written and they explain what they were thinking at the time. And their introductory chapter was sort of about how they began as a crew of people who were kind of concerned with ecological crisis. But when they began to think about ecological crisis, they began to think about the crisis in social reproduction, like how it is that the world arranges itself and how it is that the world arranges its suffering so that particular people experience it, and how it is that ecological crisis is not a thing. It's not like we're all experiencing climate change in a particular way, all in the same way. It's this differentiated liability to death. Anyway, what that all made me think is, I suppose we all think that we're engaged in maybe single issue struggles. We're not engaged in single issue struggles. We're engaged in totalizing struggles for the liberation of all things from the yoke of capitalism that happens to be taking place in different corners. I suppose my answer would be the abolition and the total bit by bit, hand by hand abolition of the border and rendering nugatory of the border altogether in its totality in a sea of human movement, so that capitalists are thrown into the sea. And yeah, look, I don't know, but I suppose that would be my answer. But it's not that involves kind of recasting the entire way that the world functions, that the way that the value is captured and the way that the world organizes itself. It may seem single issue, but I suppose nothing is.
It's borders is everything. Borders is really the most oppressive thing we have on this planet today. Borders stop refugees from fleeing. Borders stop people from coming in. Borders stop us from going places. In fact, did you know that you need a permit to leave Australia now? And you need to have a very compelling reason to be allowed to leave. So I'm with you. I don't know about throwing the capitalists in the sea though, because I know some capitalists in my family, but
look, some of them
will have mercy. Maybe
might be,
good. Parade of shame or something.
Some of them might be good looking, or they might have skills. Look, who knows? We can keep a few of them around. I suppose I might have, maybe some of your family members and me. Anyway, eventually it would sort of be to, do myself out of a job and do myself out of existence, this position that I suppose, you know, a lot of us may occupy, where essentially our role is to mediate social struggle. I suppose that's what we do. But yeah, it just got me thinking about that. It's a good book, you know, look out for Out of the Woods Collective. It's an interesting way to write as well, to do it together and in an authorless way.
I think you could even take it like one step further than borders and actually extend it to nation states broadly, and like the existence of nation states. And I was reflecting on what Jordy said about the fact that like Jewish people belong everywhere and there's no nation state. And I think something that we as Palestinians often talk about is that Palestine lives in all of us. In the absence of being able to return, we've created a kind of Palestine amongst the diaspora. And I think it's an interesting way of framing our solidarity, and an interesting way of thinking about belonging beyond the bounds of, you know, this is your piece of land and this is your piece of land and you belong here and we belong here. And I think it's, yeah, something I, when Jordy was talking about that, I was reflecting on that as like a commonality and a way to kind of build solidarity in that way.
Yeah, and look, the answer to human rights issues comes in the forms of states. Like the answer to the Palestinian struggle for human rights came to us in the proposal of a Palestinian state. But states can be oppressive. States can be terrible. States can be ruled by draconian, undemocratic leaders. So the answer to human rights issues should not always be, well, here are borders, and it's just such a wrong way to think about human rights. So yes.
Yeah. I also was reflecting on kind of what you were saying, Samah, and also what Elsa was saying in the follow-up questions about like idealism and about like the past and the future. And I think that sometimes something I often struggle with is, if we are idealists and if we're constantly reimagining what a better future could look like, where does it end? I feel like there's always going to be more to dream about. There's always going to be more to fight for. And maybe that's because I'm thinking too short term. But I do feel like, you know, what your ideals are, what your ideologies are, change over time. So if you're an idealist, then okay, what are the bounds of a future?
Yeah. Well, I think that also ties into what we're describing about all of these things being interrelated, right? Because I think when we are framing you know, this work as single issue work, then yeah, absolutely, we get over one hurdle and there's another one right after it. And I totally understand why we think about things in that framework, because when we move day to day, that is somewhat what we have to do, right? You have to think about what is the next step. But then we also get to see the ways that operating in that way continues to marginalize people, right? And where we end up giving the most privileged of the marginalized, you know, a little bit more power or a little bit more resources, and thereby assimilate them into the system that is inherently harmful anyway, particularly to the people that are the most impacted by those systems, which is often First Nations peoples. And so I think that is part of the, you know, the mindset of, you know, thinking that there's always going to be another struggle, of course, because we're always looking at these hurdles one by one. But part of, I think, grappling with the interconnected nature of oppression generally is that, you know, when you pull these things up at the roots, hopefully that means that there isn't just another oppression around the corner, or, you know, another way that system is targeting another group of people. But I think that is like such a large scale way of conceptualizing not only justice, but also our past and our future. And I tend to find that listening, like particularly to First Nations people from this continent, I find particularly inspiring in this way, because I feel that their ability to conceptualize past and future is often so far beyond what whiteness gives us in that framework. You know, we are so often thinking about what is tomorrow, or what is a day from now, or a week from now, or even 10 years from now. But what about the hundreds of thousands of years? And so I think that when we start thinking of that kind of larger scale, even in terms of time, then the ways that we can disrupt and uproot those systems hopefully means that there is a more ideal future that we could reach.
Yeah, and everything is interconnected, right? It's like, if anyone thinks anything's single issue, they're sorely mistaken, you know, and this is what, you know, all of the acknowledgements at the start of everyone's talk, when you say, I'm coming to you from Wurundjeri country or Wathaurong country, and I'd like to acknowledge Aboriginal people and that sovereignty was never ceded. Like, all of these issues, you can't get away from the fact that it's Indigenous land which has been stolen and illegally occupied as well. So anything here, if you're talking in this country, is related to that. And that's also why any kind of freedom efforts or solidarity actions and all that has to come from those relationships first, which is, you know, relationality and relationships with land, country, people, and relationship building, and also relationships to country. Like Indigenous people here in Australia, we're ontologically bound to certain places of country, so we do have place. And you know, Aileen Morton Robinson talks about that's why Aboriginal people are never out of place, because we have those relationships to our country. So though I'm coming to you from Kulin Nations country, I'm, you know, still connected to my country, Yamatji country in Western Australia. So yeah, so whenever we're talking about issues happening or any kinds of battles that we're fighting, that's why it's always important that these things are prefaced first, and that when we're talking about Indigenous acknowledgements and sovereignty, things like that, we do think about how those words take action, like solidarity, action building, freedom creating, all these things have to come with action, like whether it's through words and, you know, events like this and, you know, other things. But yeah, and it's a great space to have these discussions and talk about what futures we want to build and how we want to go about taking the work to do them. But yeah, anyway, I'm babbling still. I've got lots of people in my house at the moment, so forgive me, that's why I've got headphones on. It might get getting a little bit like sidetracked. But anyway, sorry about that.
Does anyone have final comments or responses? Otherwise, I
was thinking about throwing capitalists in the sea. Like we said before, and I'm like, we'd all have to move quite inland, wouldn't we? Because that would like be like
we could form a human boat. You know, I for one, yeah, I've got my swimmers ready.
Well,
our last act of solidarity, quietly get in the sea.
Do you really want to pollute the sea? Doesn't the sea have problems?
Cannons, fired out of cannons, you know, it's all sorts of things. Anyway, this is for the movement.
It'll stop the pollution.
Yeah, for the movement to decide.
Collective decision making. I'm really excited about this group and what's all the events that are going to come. So it's been a great opening. Anyway, that's all I say.
My final words would be the same. Congratulations. Go get them. Be loud.
I'm sorry, my bloody capitalism, my internet just cut out and I missed a bunch of chat, and I'm really sorry. And I missed your wisdom in the last few minutes.
I think on the point of throwing capitalists in the sea, there's like something to be, and I'm going to take it a bit of a serious turn, but I think there's something to be said for like community building and the importance of like, as much as we can, meeting people where they're at and bringing them along the ride and creating like a majority population across the globe that all have like kind of leading by example and all have the values that we have and that we're sharing in this forum. And I think, yeah, I just wanted to say that.
I'd love to add as well, and this was just a line that really stood out to me when Joan was speaking about, I was specifically referred to drowning in our guilt for surviving. And I was just thinking about it as we were talking about drowning capitalists, and this phrase just kept coming back to me. But it's just one that really stood out to me because I think that you know, I think even when we're talking about actually like that we are living the past and the present and the future, that, you know, in some respects we are, or for some of us, we might be living some of the futures that our ancestors or the, you know, communities that have come before us have fought for, whether we think that that is an endpoint or not, you know, is, you know, we are still in the future in some way. But what does it mean to actually be able to enjoy the aspects of that future as well? And, you know, I think that that's something that I find really meaningful at like Pesach, for example, when we recline, because it's like, you know, only free people recline. And there's like this moment of reflecting on what it means to have the freedoms that we have while still experiencing the oppressions that we do, or acknowledging the oppression that we experience as a collective when other people continue to be oppressed. And, you know, I think this drowning in our guilt for surviving is something that I feel sometimes, whether that is like intergenerationally or even day to day, even just doing a bit better or a bit less than I was before, or being less burnt out than I was before. I can feel myself still drowning in like this kind of form of survivor's guilt. And I think, you know, it's so important that if we are living those futures that, you know, we find opportunities for joy in them as well, and to be able to celebrate the parts of the future that we might have come to, while still having this commitment to working towards the futures that we want to see for others as well.
I think that's the thing, right? Like, these struggles don't need to be drudgery. Like, it doesn't need to be awful to do this work. It can be joy-filled and joyous and invigorating and special and beautiful. And, you know, the fact, just bouncing off something, you know, Crystal was saying before, and I was speaking today with legal scholar Amanda Porter. We're talking about Aboriginal sovereignties and the ways in which, you know, we do these acknowledgements, but that's completely insufficient. And so often when people do the work of creating something, they act as though this is terra nullius, or this is, you know, as though the nation state is a reality that we should be calling on and making demands of, as though they're in control. You know, and every time you ask something of the Australian government without saying, actually, the Australian government, you don't have that authority, you know, you're working against the very fact that Aboriginal sovereignty is in existence. And genuinely working from the starting point of we're on sovereign Aboriginal land doesn't need to be a barrier, you know, for non-Indigenous people. It's not a barrier. You know, it doesn't need to be this thing that gets in the way of your political campaigns and makes things a bit harder to figure out. It's actually what makes things open and possible. And it's where we get, you know, respect, and we recognise our own interconnectedness. But too often I think it's sort of seen as, you know, that's the thing that, you know, white people will deal with later. Or it's separate. It's a separate question, and it's not. It's the first point for every claim that we can make on this land, I think. In a very real, it has to be made, we have to take it seriously. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jordy, and everyone. I think we will have that as the last comment. But again, I'd just like to thank all of our speakers and all of our attendees for coming. This has been a launch. It's been a kind of launch. I guess. Oh yeah. A couple of things before I hand over to fully automated Kosher Space Kibbutz again for some more music stylings, is that we want to and this event we're looking forward. Our next event is going to be on the 10th of October, most likely COVID permitting, et cetera, to celebrate Rosh Chodesh, which is the first day of the month of Cheshvan. More details to come. I'd also like to take this moment to plug an event from our sister organization, Tzedek, anti-colonial Jewish action group based on Gadigal, Wongal, Darug, Bijigal, and Tharal country. They have a launch event as well coming up, and it is a poetry night and art auction fundraiser on the 18th of September. Yeah, go to Tzedek on Instagram for more details. But yeah, that's it from us. Gratitude, respect. Thank you so much. I'm so excited for what's to come. And yeah, I think that's all from me. Take it away, fully automated.
Sag je revenue, was wird sein, als der Vaccin wird kommen? Als der Vaccin wird kommen, wollen wir machen as zu den New. Und wer wird uns anladen zum Verdingen auf der zu den New? Tammy. Timmah von Grundmecklers, Tammy, Timmah von Grundmecklers. Tammy, Timmah wird anladen zu uns zum Verdingen auf der Süden. Und wer wird nehmen sich zu verrichten auf der Süden? Moshiach, Moshiach. Moshiach wird nehmen sich zu verrichten, Tammy, Timmah wird anladen uns zum Verdingen auf der Süden. Und wer wird mal gucken, dem Gezettel läuft der zu den New. Peter, Daton, die Paskudnik. Peter, Daton, die Paskudnik. Peter, Daton, wird mal gucken, der Gezettel. Mashiach wird nehmen sich zu das verrichten. Tammy, Timmah wird uns anladen, uns zum Verdingen. If there's Sultan you. Und wer wird klingen der Polizei auf der Sultan you? Dann Andrews der Braun. Dann Andrews der Braun. Dann Andrews der Braun, der klingen der Polizei. Peter, Datum wird mal gucken, dem Gezettel. Mashiach wird nehmen sich zu das verrichten. Tammy, Timmah wird anladen uns zum Verdingen auf der Süden. Und wer wird uns Chochmah sagen auf der Süden? Sarina Rasso, Sarina Rasso. Sarina Rasso wird Chochmah sagen, danach wird vergraben und klingen der Polizei. Peter, Daten wird Last und dem Gezettel. Mashiach wird nehmen sich ein das verrichten. Tammy, Timmah wird anladen uns zum Verdingen auf der Süden. Wer wird uns bringen, der Mashiach auf der Süden? Friedenberg, der Reaganomic Chef. dem nach Chirac. Serena Russell, der uns braucht mal Sorgen. Dann Andrews, der Braut, der Ton klingelt der Polizei. Peter, Button, der Backkuchen, dem Gezerrt. Maschiach, wird nehmen sich super Rippen. Tami, die Mache, wird und Lorden und super Dingen. Auf der Sudan.
Fully automated luxury kosher space kibbutz. You think you can fuck with someone like this?
You what you mean, someone like this?
Techno-capitalist singularity as Judaic futurism vector through neo-nomadic Globalized class formation leads to loopholes in the collapsing climate system. As self-deregulating markets crash into feedback loops of data, machinic intelligence emerges. In Vilna, 3023, the third laboratory renaissance begins. Microprocessor Talmudic analysis of Kabbalistic algorithms reveals the cyberotic potentialities of the from bedroom. An avatar of Menahem Mendel Schneerson broadcasts messianic promises from the LED screens of mitzvah tanks, which occupy Galicia in preparation for the re-uploading of the Baal Shem Tov. The Radno-Bubby complex modernizes, upgrades built and drags you into the dark web. The Fourth Rabbinical Council of Scattered Ashes is lurching into crisis. Cloning, lateral genodata transfer and transversal replication have led to chronological disjunction in the weekly Parsha. The land of milk and honey goes full Mad Max as mechanized Israeli Defense Force or vertically expand Greater Israel through the Babel V2 program. Millennialist evangelicals and Likud-affiliated militias battle each other after the final breakdown of a superficial, temporary alliance under the banner of
Judeo-Christian values. Palestinians are eventually so dispossessed that they transcend carnal existence and hover as the carnal goes through the West Bank.
Haunting the sickly blood of settlers. Transhumanist biotech enables functional immortality, and a 350-year-old Sarah Silverman is on Saturday Night Live every night waving a Havdalah candle menacingly at the world. The Neo-Bud arrives from the future, offering revolution stripped of all Christian socialist eschatology and reinscribed with fluid time schemata. The end is coming. The end has come. The end would have come until its problematic elements are deconstructed on cool Jews. Scattered and desperate, neo-Bundist forces remix the Torah, hack Xenodata to counteract racial essentialism, and crash
Their daughter's got mitzvah for free, please.
Meltdown.
Planetary rootless cosmopolitan syndrome spreads
As Gentiles adopt the Judaic hypertextual method, following
things like a stick out the sea of a boy discovering the
dissolution of the biosphere into the technosphere, and the collapse of both into the Cthulhu-sphere. Nomadic safari rabbis expand the tentacles of scientific knowledge from 30th century Dubai into neo-feudal Europe. The fully automated luxury kosher space kibbutz is sucked into wormholes Zuckerberg 4382, leaving a trail of dust and the ephemeral
Architecture of embryonic futures.